History is littered with many events, people, places, and civilizations. One of these civilizations stands out in particular: ancient Greece. Of all other civilizations, ancient Greece is unique in that much of its culture, literature, and even architecture has remained and defines much of what we know of our world today. Fascinating, right? However, much as this is the case, ancient Greece had a long history spanning close to 3 millennia. In all this time, many events defined Greek society and culture. We will look at one event in this period that is not known to many people: the Dark Age that took place in ancient Greece. Defining the Dark Age. Most of us have heard the term Dark Ages before, commonly in reference to the medieval period in Europe. However, the true definition is a little bit more nuanced than that. The term Dark Age refers to an era or period where no literary sources can tell us more about how life was in that particular time. With this in mind, let us unpack the ancient Greek Dark Age, how it began, what it was like, and how it came to an end. Ancient Greek Dark Age, the beginning. When we hear of ancient Greece, philosophers like Plato or Socrates, or warriors such as Alexander the Great come to mind. However, hundreds of years before Athens was founded, Greek culture flourished and spread. This pre-classical culture exists between 2000 to 1200 BC and was known as the Mycenaean culture. Before its demise, the Mycenaean culture played a significant role in the late Bronze Age of the Mediterranean. It was on equal footing with significant regional powers, including the Egyptians and the Hittites. The Mycenaeans shared more traits with their neighbors from the island of Crete, known as the Minoans, than they did with other Greeks, despite being of Greek descent and speaking a language that was the direct ancestor of classical Greek. Some scholars see the Mycenaeans as the later torchbearers of a more remarkable Aegean civilization because of their cultural similarities to the Minoans and the fact that they conquered Crete while continuing many Minoan traditions, similar to how the Romans continued Hellenic traditions after the Greeks. It would be reasonable to think that since the Mycenaeans had such a significant impact on history in the late Bronze Age, that there is a ton of research and precise chronologies on the issue. Yet, the reverse is true. Mycenaeans were literate, but there was little written material from their time. As a result, current scholars must employ various techniques to piece together the development of the Mycenaean civilization and what came later. The Greek Dark Age, also known as the Homeric Age or the Geometric Age, is said to have occurred between 1100 BC to around 750 BC. This period followed the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization to the beginning of the Archaic Age. Historians have had difficulty explaining why the Mycenaean civilization fell due to the unavailability of written materials. However, two significant reasons have come up explaining the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization: climate catastrophe and the invasion of the Mycenaean people from the Sea People. These Sea People, or the Dorian people, are believed to have originated from the Black Sea. Most of these reasons are primarily speculative, and no definitive cause has been attributed to the fall of the Mycenaean people. At the onset of the Dark Ages, numerous large-scale uprisings occurred in various eastern Mediterranean regions. People already suffering from famine and poverty launched attempts to topple established kingdoms, resulting from economic and political instability. The poorest Greek lives would have stayed primarily unchanged during this period. However, areas such as Attica, Euboea, and central Crete recovered more economically from all these events than other Greek regions. Major economic activities such as farming, weaving, metallurgy, and pottering persisted at a reduced rate and were mainly done for local use. However, with the advent of the proto-geometric style around 1050 BC, some technological advancements were made. People, however, tended to go for more straightforward and less elaborate pieces. Fewer resources in this period were also spent on art production. The collapse of architecture and language. Other than a few fortifications on the Athens Acropolis, none of the Mycenaean palaces from the Old Bronze Age remained. From archaeological evidence and findings, historians discovered that palaces and fortified buildings experienced the majority of destruction. In the Cyclades, a group of islands in Greece, up to 90% of small sites were abandoned, indicating a significant population decline. In this period, the written language ceased being used. Historians have labeled this language Linear B and have not been able to decipher it. The Dark Ages had now become dark indeed. Culture. Following the demolition of palaces, massive stone structures were no longer erected. Subsequently, wall paintings also ceased. As towns and villages became abandoned, vital trade links between people and communities were lost. The entire system of government, from organized state armies to kings, officials, and all forms of government, completely vanished. Commerce also came to a standstill, as the redistributive palace economy came tumbling down, and the end of the Linear B script. It should come as no surprise that most information about this period comes from graves and goods excavated from them. That is, however, not to say that there were no emergent communities. They existed but were fragmented and localized. These new communities were characterized by the absence of aesthetic and cultural continuity and the diversity of material cultures, including pottery. Examples of such pottery include the conservative in Athens and the eclectic in Knossos. Before this period, pottery designs were more complex aesthetically, as they were characterized by lines and curves compared to the proto-geometric style in this period. Burial customs and settlement patterns also differed significantly. Greek society. It is difficult to know how day-to-day life in ancient Greece took place during this period, but a few tidbits here and there give us a general picture of what it might have been like living in this era. Most likely, the Greeks used kinship groups known as oikoi or iki to partition Greece into different regions. In the Peloponnese, for example, archaeologists found a region known as Nicoria having Dark Age settlements, which revealed how a Bronze Age town had been abandoned in 1150 BC. This town re-emerged later as a hamlet cluster by 1075 BC. Historians, through archaeology, have estimated that Nicoria had a population of only 40 families and large tracts of land for grazing and farming. Although there were people of high status in the Dark Ages, their living standards were not all that better off than other villagers. Most Greeks at this time resided in compact towns rather than solitary farmsteads. It is also believed that the oikos, or allotment, was the primary economic resource for each family at the beginning of the historical period, without which a man could not marry. The family was the basic unit at this time, and the family acted to protect its members from outsiders. The males in the family worked both to defend their properties and raid their neighbors and steal their livestock and women from time to time. A council made decisions that affected the whole oikos of elders, most likely under the counsel and guidance of the family head. The best way to explain ancient Greece in this period is as a border society. Individuals tended to guard their possessions and occasionally appropriate items from other oikoi. Activities between families were typically feud-related. There were also no wealth disparities within the family, and thus there was the assumption that all males who were mature enough to fight were on an equal footing. The dawn of light, writing redeveloped. Although the Dark Ages had completely overtaken the great city of Greece, its long history had proven that one thing you could count on was that Greece would always bounce back. True to form, the signs began to show. By the middle to the end of the 8th century BC, the Greeks had developed a new alphabet, which they had adopted from the Phoenician writing system. This system created the first completely alphabetic, as opposed to abjad, writing system by adding characters for vowel sounds such as O, E, I, and so on. This new writing method was adopted by neighboring communities, such as Phrygians and other communities. Our modern English also borrows from this alphabet system. and most English words are copied from the Greek language. End of an era. Greece's economic recovery was well underway by the beginning of the 8th century BC, according to the archaeological evidence from numerous locations. Cemeteries like Kerameikos in Athens, or Lefkandi, and sanctuaries like Olympia, which was recently established in Delphi, or the Heraion of Samos, the first colossal freestanding temples, were lavishly supplied with offerings. These included objects from the Near East, Egypt, and Italy, made of exotic materials like amber and ivory. Greek pottery exports show contact with the territory of the Villanovian civilization to the north of Rome and the Levant coast at locations like Elmina. The Greeks began using increasingly decorated pottery with intricate figured scenes that mirrored the Homeric epic stories. Improvements were made to iron equipment and weapons. At the same time, the revived Mediterranean trade provided fresh supplies of copper and tin for the production of a wide variety of intricate bronze artifacts, such as tripod stands, like those awarded at prizes in the funeral games Achilles celebrated for Patroclus. In addition to Euboea, other coastal districts of Greece also actively participated in the commercial and cultural exchanges of the eastern and central Mediterranean, and communities formed the government by an aristocratic elite rather than by a single basileus or chieftain as in earlier eras. The period of Greek Dark Ages was one giant roller coaster that spanned close to 4 centuries. It was a dramatic shift from what was once the norm in an entirely different way of life. Many things were lost in this period, including artifacts, history, culture, and language. Therefore, generations that lived in this time relied on themselves to give themselves an identity. The Greeks were indeed unique, since they started everything from scratch. Though the Dark Ages are always associated with many negatives, it also has some silver linings. For example, the Dark Ages gave way to the rise of the polis, which were great administrative and religious cities in Greece. This period also introduced a new language and written materials, which eventually played a vital role in the advancement of science and mathematics. Modern forms of governance such as democracy were also birthed following this period and adopted in many nations. The Dark Ages was a period that had its merits and setbacks. Without it, the world probably wouldn't be where it is today. One could argue that the end justifies the existence of such a dark age. But what do you think?